Hello, everybody from Michigan. Yes, I am a North Carolina transplant now, and I'm in Michigan. So, wait, does that mean I'm a Michigan transplant? I'm not quite sure, but I am so excited to be here for our first Fri-YAY Par-TAY. Now, I realize that I had the wrong date. It said May 18th, so I'm hoping somebody shows up. But until then, I'm just going to kind of go over some wisdom that I had for you all because yeah, it's a thing. If it's your first time watching this or your first time here with me, I am Candace. I am your real estate instructor of the day, otherwise known as your cruise director, and my goal is to help you learn. So when you do get here, if you do get here, say hi in the chat so I know I'm not talking to myself. Otherwise, what I thought we would talk about today, if there's nobody here with me, because of course the whole point here is you have questions and I answer them. But if there are no questions from you all, then what I wanted to do was talk about the types of questions you might see on the exam. Right? Because there's, oh, yay, I do have people. Hi, Kaylin. Hi, Carlos. Hi, Anna. Oh, I'm so glad you all could join me. It's a Friday party. I am so excited. Happy Good Friday to you as well for those who celebrate. If you don't, just have a good Friday, right? That's how it goes around here. So, if somebody has a question, please drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to share my screen with you. Now, what you all see here is just something I put together when I was trying to explain the exam to a new student who was struggling with passing. And the thing is, when it comes to the questions, I like you to point out that there is definitely a, how do I say this? I don't want to say a hierarchy, but there's an organization to the question. So when you're taking this real estate exam, you could see a lot of different types of questions. So let's talk about it. Now, in general, and let me scoot this over, you are going to have, and I'll put this in orange so you can tell when it's me writing. You're going to have your basic knowledge questions, right? Your basic knowledge questions. And when I say that, what I mean is, hey, I just need to know, do you know what makes up a deed? What do you need in order to have a valid contract? So if you have my essential lists, stuff like that. This could kind of be like definitions of, words, which I do have under vocabulary, but it would be like, where does this word go? Or where does it apply to? Or, if there's a question that would be like this, would be something like, when you have a mortgage, you'll also generally have a promissory note. We're talking about, do you understand the basics? We're talking about, do you know the difference between a quitclaim deed and a general warranty deed? Right? This would also talk about your laws and regulations. Like, this is the stuff you just have to memorize. There's no applying a scenario here. It's just you have to know what the protected classes are for fair housing. End story. You just have to know what those are. What are the laws? What are the exemptions? You all know that there are exemptions to the fair housing law. In fact, if you're watching, can you tell me what the fair housing protected classes are? I'll go over it in a moment if you want me to, but these are things you just have to know, including your dates and your numbers here, right? You got to know your dates and your numbers. It's just basic knowledge. There's nothing for it but to memorize it. That's it, guys. Basic knowledge. Now, if you're lucky, you might get a true-false question. You might get which of the following is true, which of the following is false, which, if you know your materials, we like that. We love this. It's awesome because either you know it or you don't. True false questions, if you don't know the material, can be tricky, but if you've been studying, they should be good. But these are also the questions that can get you which of the following is not true, which is basically saying false. Things like that. You want to just be careful as you're reading them. You're going to have your vocab questions, which, of course, you need to know your synonyms. What is another word for, I don't know, a straight loan? Well, that would be an interest only loan, right? So we might just need to know the vocab, things like that. And then you're going to have your scenario questions. So these are the kinds of questions where you have to know, what is it I'm supposed to do? What is it I'm not supposed to do? What can I do if I'm somebody's agent? What's going to be included in the fiduciary duties? What's not going to be included in the fiduciary duties? And then we've got our math. And if you've been watching me for a little while, you know that when it comes to math, you're either going to have math where you need a calculator, which would not be California, or you're going to have math where you just have to know like common knowledge. So these are the types of questions when they talk about CMA math, like doing the appraisal math. If you have a subject that's better than your, comparable, or your comp that's, inferior to the subject, do you add or do you subtract, right? And then of course you've got if you got a really old test, you have the 1 only, 2 only, neither 1 or 2, both 1 and 2. Those are a type of question as well. So I don't know if that helps anybody, but those are your general question types. So now that I've said all that and I've had a chance for some of y'all to be in here, what questions do you all have for me today? And I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'll let you ask. What questions do you all have for me today, for me to answer? It's kind of like a stump the teacher. So I know that you all have the questions because whenever we're in a webinar, you ask them. What questions do you have? If you don't have questions, then of course I could come up with something. But what are you struggling with? This is supposed to be a time where if you don't have a live teacher every day and you have a question, you're kind of wanting to know, well, what is the answer? I could go over some questions. But come on, guys. I know you're there. I know that you all are there watching. What questions do you have for me? Anything? We'll just keep waiting. We will wait. In fact, while I'm waiting for you all to decide you have something to say, I'm going to see, can I speak on math and can I speak on dual agent, sub-agent? Now, Deborah, what the approaches seem to differ. Okay, I got you. I like all of these. So, Elena, you said math. Tell me a little bit more about what math you need me to go over. But Deborah, can I talk about dual agent, sub-agent? Now, those are two different things. Dual agency and sub-agency. And I guess the best way to describe this is a dual agent means, well, let's talk about what agency is to begin with. It means if you were a broker, you are representing somebody else's interest. So if you're a buyer's agent as a broker, you represent the buyer's interest and you're not representing the seller's interest. If you are a seller's agent, you're representing the seller's interest and you're not representing the buyer's interest. As an agent, you are just, and we call that single agency. You are representing either the buyer or the seller. Dual agency is when somebody has come along to say, hey, you know what? So let's say it's me, Candace, they trust me, and I am now representing both the buyer and the seller. That is dual agency. Now, sometimes, depending on your state, you might have designated agency, which is kind of like a type of dual agency. Let's say I was the broker and there were agents that were working under me. I might assign somebody to say, hey, I want you, Elena, to work with the buyer, and Anna, you work with the seller. Now, they've both hired me as the broker, but there's two different agents in our office that are working like single agents. That would be designated agency. That's dual agency, a kind of dual agency, simply because both the buyer and the seller hired me as the broker. That broker is representing both buyer and seller. Now, the second part of what you asked for was sub-agency. And sub-agency can be a little tricky because it's one of those things that has two meanings. Don't you hate that? I feel like they do that trying to get us. Two meanings. So let's talk about it this way. Elena and I don't remember who was it that asked. It was Deborah. So Deborah, let's say I am your broker. Remember, that seller or that buyer hired me. I am actually their agent. You happen to be a salesperson underneath me. So as the broker, I might not be helping every single client individually. There could be people in my office. So I've hired you as a sales associate. You work with me, Deborah. And now you're going to be working with that buyer or seller. The definition of sub-agent is the agent of an agent. So because that buyer or seller hired me, if you are the person actually working with the client, that makes you an agent of the agent. We can call you a sub-agent. Because they didn't hire you, the contract is between me and the client. That's the first way we can talk about sub-agency. The second way can be a little bit weird, and it really just depends on the state that you're in. Some states, like where I came from in North Carolina, have what we call sub-agency, which is, long story short, and Deborah, unless you say you practice this in your state, I'm going to leave it simple. It's where a seller could hire a listing agent. Well, that's great. That listing agent, their job was to list and market the house. Generally, it's not that same broker or company that finds the buyer. So let's say it's me. I am the seller's agent. I work for Ellis Realty, my last name. I'm the listing agent. There's a good chance it's not going to be me or somebody in my office who finds the buyer. Maybe it's you, Deborah, with XYZ Realty. Now, generally, in states that don't practice transactional brokerage or, where something similar to that, and I say this from a state like North Carolina, if you want to be part of that transaction, you work for the buyer or you work for the seller. We don't have transactional brokerages. Some states don't. And in the states that don't, typically what can happen is the seller already has a listing agent, and if the buyer doesn't want to hire a firm on their own, you with XYZ Realty could become a second agent of the seller. So the seller has two different brokers representing their interests. They have the broker that listed the property, marketed it, and we have the broker that found the seller. They're the selling agent. Now, that type of sub-agency is weird. So, Deborah, unless you want me to go into more detail, we're going to call that done. Right? All right, let's move on to our next one. Anna, you said the approaches seem to differ. When you say, Anna, the approaches, do you mean the approaches for, what's that word? Appraisal. Do you mean the appraisal approaches? So what I mean by that is, are you talking about this? Are these the approaches that you're talking about, Anna? Just go ahead and let me know. Have a little sip of water while I wait. Are these the approaches you're talking about? The sales comparison approach, the cost approach, the income approach. When you say approach, that's what I'm thinking you mean? but I don't know. I do not know. I feel like we need a music moment. I feel like I need a. The question becomes, what type of approaches does Anna want me to go over? Oh, okay, there we go. You said you think so. Good. Okay, well, anytime I hear the word approach, I generally think of appraisals. Are there any other approaches? No, not that I know of, but some teachers, some places call things differently. So when we talk about approaches, what we're talking about is the fact when an appraiser does an appraisal, they can choose how they want to come up with the value. Kind of like if you were to put into your phone right now, hey, how do I get to Michigan? From wherever you are, Anna, if you said, hey, Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, could you tell me which path to get to Candace? You could, and we're driving, you could take a no tolls way. You could take a way with tolls. You could take the scenic route. Those are options you have. But all roads lead to you coming to visit me in Michigan, where it's cold, because y'all let me live here. Why did y'all let me do that? Right? Same concept, but with appraisals. When an appraiser gets an assignment, they have to ask some questions like, okay, why am I doing this? So you see down right here, you've got these three approaches, and this is a very general thing. In general, if it's land, residential, and commercial properties, just, like an office space or something, they're going to use the sales comparison approach. They would use the cost approach if it's an unusual property like a church or an old school, a good old firehouse, or if you just don't have good comps. And you would have the direct income approach if it's a property where the whole point is to produce income, like an apartment complex. So when we talk about, well, which approach do I use? The first thing is, A, we don't use approaches. We are not appraisers. B, an appraiser is going to look at the scenario to figure out, okay, what do I need to use? Sales comparison approach, because it's land. Remember, land, the only way to find the value is the sales comparison approach. Or is it something where I don't have really good comps? Like, how many other fire stations have sold in the last 3 to 6 months? None? All right, I'm going to have to use the cost approach. Or the direct income approach is where the appraiser says the value is in how much money a property can make you. So think if you were to do your first residential investment property. Would you want to pay more money for something that brings you in $12,000 a year or something that brings you in $48,000 a year? I think it's pretty clear, the $48,000. So it has more value, and the direct income approach, that's what it breaks down as. So first, let me make sure that makes sense to everybody. If that makes sense, like why we use an approach, give me some type of emoji. I love my emojis. Let me know that makes sense, because I don't want to go more into detail with that if it doesn't. And I know I hate the delay, but one day we won't have a delay. Why is water so good? I don't know. Uh-oh, no response. I can't tell if it's a delay or I can't tell if it's because you don't understand. Oh no. Give it another second before I go through, and I'll just assume it makes sense. All right, I'm just going to assume it makes sense. Oh, perfect. Man, that's like a minute-long delay. That's okay. It is okay. I just have to time myself. So if that's making sense, Anna, let's talk about the sales comparison approach. This is what our CMA is based off of. The comparative market analysis is based off of the sales comparison approach. And that's where you have a house that's a subject house, and we don't know what the value of this is. But we do have a comp house that's similar. And we do know, let's just making up numbers, we know that it recently sold for $250,000. In the sales comparison approach, we say, well, if this house sold for $250,000 and this one is smaller, then it's going to sell for less than $250,000. Now, there's some math that goes into that, but that's the concept. It's this idea that if we want to know the subject property, so we choose at least three comps to say, well, these are similar enough so that if we know what these sold for, it can lead us to what this appraiser thinks the subject house would sell for. Now, I'm not going to go into the math right now because you said you wanted some clarity on these. The other way I like to think of the sales comparison approach is if you were to go to some place like, Ross Dress for Less. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a Ross. But always you want something. Let's say that there's there's a shirt. Oh, Lord, I can't draw a shirt. Let's say there's a pair of pants. Yep, these are pants. Oop, okay, close enough. Those are pants. And those pants have no price tag. So what do? You pick up another pair of pants. And this one says, oh, it's $40. And they're similar. They're just a different color. You take both to the counter and you go, well, hey, if these are $40, there shouldn't be a difference in the price. So that means these should be $40. That's all the cost approach is doing. It's basically saying, if I know what the value is of this pair, I can figure out the value of that pair. That is the cost approach. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if somebody's got a question, just let me know. But I want to move on to the, let's say the cost approach. That's the sales comparison approach. That's how we do the sales comparison approach. Now we want to talk about the cost approach. The cost approach says, look, we don't have good comps. And because we don't have good comps, let's figure out how much it would cost to rebuild this. Imagine it's a one of a kind. If something is one of a kind and somebody wants to know the value, well, how much would it cost to rebuild it? That is what the key is here. Everything that makes this complicated is about how are we going to rebuild it. So you have this structure. You have this structure here. Why? We're talking about the structure because the only way to come up with the value of land is that sales comparison approach. So we'll find the value of the land, but we have to find the value of the improvement by rebuilding it. You got to decide how you're going to rebuild it. Are you going to do an exact reproduction? Or are we going to do a similar replacement? So what I mean is if the house was built in 1879, an exact reproduction means you're going to cut stuff down, trees down the same way they did. You're going to have to find a carpenter who uses the tools that did it the same way they did in 1879. And if you do the replacement, it's like you went to the Home Depot or Costco or something to get the repairs. You're going to figure out, how do I want to rebuild it? To get the repairs, to get the products, the supplies. That's what I'm trying to say. Then you got to price how much it's going to cost to rebuild it. And by that, I mean, you could either go kind of loose, like a square foot. Oh, it's going to cost about $100 a square foot. Or you could say, oh, you know what? The roof is going to be $19,000, and the kitchen is going to cost us about $42,000, and the flooring is going to cost us $30,000. Like, you're bringing down the different units, and you say, well, when I add those together, that tells me a value. Or you could do the quantity survey method, which is you want to know exact, like how much and how many nails did you use? How many light switches do you need? How many doorknobs do you need? This is a good way to piss off an appraiser. Ain't nobody got time for that. Most of the time, a lot of people will go with the unit in place. But the appraiser is going, okay, how much would it cost for me to rebuild this? And when I rebuild it, it's going to be brand new. Brand new, made today. Like if you went to go get a 2025 car today off the lot, it's brand new. Nobody's touched it. The problem with that is generally when an appraiser comes in to appraise a home, it's not new, it's used. Somebody else lived in it, which means we need to depreciate it. Just like if you took your car to CarMax right now. They're not going to give you the value of the car when it was brand new. They're going to give you the value of the car because it's used. They depreciate it. And there's two ways they could depreciate it. They could depreciate it using the breakdown method, or they could use the age straight life method. The great part about this is only an appraiser has to make this decision. You need to know about it, but you will never have to make this decision as a real estate agent. Never, ever, never, ever, 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 ever.
Shut up.
Never. Right? So, what this is, I mean, you could be tested on it, but on the breakdown method, so this one over here, this is where you get that physical deterioration, meaning the physical, kind of like if you took your car back to CarMax to sell it, if there's a dent on the side, if the bottom is rusted out, if somebody keyed your car, like that Carrie Underwood song, I don't know, there's physical, the physical quality of it isn't good, so we have to take off some value from that new status. Or maybe your car is really old and it has a tape deck, so that means we're going to lose money because it has a tape deck, right? That's functional obsolescence. Now, if we were talking about a house, ever walk into a ranch, a brick ranch, and it's 3 or 4 bedrooms and 1 bath? Functionally, nobody wants that. Nobody wants a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, a 4-bedroom, 1 bath. Y'all, where I moved to, I have 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and I'm like, I'm short a full bathroom here. It's just me. But yet I feel like there should be a bathroom, a full one for each room. It's functionally obsolete. Will I make it work? I suppose. I don't have a choice. Life is hard, first world problems. But there you go. All right? So the functional obsolescence means it's outdated. So if you sold your car and it had a tape deck, you would get less money. And then you got economic obsolescence. This is when something outside the property, is affecting the value. Like the fact you live near the garbage dump. Like the fact you live near a highway and it makes lots of noise. Or maybe it's a food processing plant and it stinks. I don't know, but it's when something outside the property brings down the value. That is one way that the appraiser can depreciate. The other way they can appreciate is going to be this age straight line method. And that has to do more with, I can't really explain that one without math, so just know it exists. So to kind of sum it up, first, and let me change here, bloop, 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 bloop. Need some more opacity there. First, they rebuild it, then they depreciate it, and that gives them a value. And then the third way that we come up with value, again, is with that income producing property, and either they're going to be using the NOI, So we say if you take the NOI, or net operating income, and divide it by the cap rate, you would get value. Or it could be the GIM or the GRM, which again is math based. So there you go. Kaylin, I didn't see your question, but you said historical properties. Yes, the cost approach would usually be for historical properties. And along that way, you'd probably be here with historical properties like an exact means this could be a problem if it's a historical property. And it probably is going to have some type of functional obsolescence or physical deterioration because it's old. All right. Hopefully that cleared that up. Let me get another sip of water and you tell me if there's any other questions we need to go over when we talk about that. Otherwise, I think somebody had asked me about discount points and tax. I think it was you, Elena, that asked me about discount points and tax. So let's go. Sorry, I had to listen to me drink there. I guess I could mute myself, but also. All right. What exactly is needed on solicitation period? Broker info versus my agent's info. Okay, we'll come back to that, Anna. We will come back to that. So it says, can I explain about math and discount points? Sure can. I sure can. So let me find this discount point sheet. And actually, before we get there, let's go here. We know, actually, didn't we do some math the other day? Let me check here. I know this is weird, guys, but I feel like we did some math. Let me unlock this. Did we do math? We did math. Maybe it was here in our okay, this is what I was looking for. Do you remember when we were in the Prep Agent webinar, we used this amortization chart, and we found out if you were getting a loan for $150,000 at 3.25% for 30 years, your payment was $652.50, right? Because it was 3.25%. But if you got a loan at 5.75% interest, your payment was $874.50. So I'm saying that because the lower your interest rate, the lower your payment. And if you don't like this 5.75%, you're like, oh no, that is too high. 5.75% interest rate is just too friggin' high for me. I don't want to pay $874 a month on this $150,000 loan. Well, then you can get a lower interest rate by buying down your points. So, right there. Let's get a lower interest rate. You are starting at 5.75%. And what you want to go to is 5%. This is what you have. This is what you want. We want 5%. Well, the bank is not going to make as much money if they only charge you 5% interest. So they're going to charge you what we call discount points. They're going to charge you discount points, which is basically upfront interest. Instead of collecting money for you from 30 years, they're charging you money right now to cover this difference. So how do they do that? Well, I'll show you. This number line represents between, change colors here, 5% and 6%. That's between 6% and 5%. Now, we said we were starting at 5.75, which is 5 3/4, which is 5 and, oop, that's too dark. Boop, boop. 5 6/8. That's where we are. This is 5.75%. Now, if you need me to go over how I got that, I will tell you. What program did I use to create my charts? Depends, but usually Adobe programs. I've just used Adobe for 20 plus years, so I tend to do that. But if there's a specific chart that you want, let me know and I can send it to you. Or you can, it just depends. So this is where we're starting. What the bank is going to say is, hey, you're going to have to pay 1 point. And every time you pay a point, I will lower your interest rate 1/8. So if you pay them 1 point, they will take your loan from 5.75, which is 5 6/8. You pay them 1 point, and now your loan is at 5 5/8%. That's what 1 point gets you. Well, if you pay a second point, we're now going to be at 5 4/8, which is 5.5%. It costs you another point. So in total, if you paid 2 points, instead of being at 5.75, you be at 5.5. But that's not low enough for you. You want 5. So we're going to have to pay another point. And that gets us to 5 3/8. And we're going to have to pay another point. And that gets us to 5 2/8, which is the same as 5.25%. That's still not low enough. So then you're going to have to pay another point, and that's going to get you to 5 1/8. And then you're going to pay another point, and that's what gives us to 5%. So we might have started here. We started here. We're trying to get point to 5%. So we had to pay 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, 6 points. In prepaid interest. It's going to cost you 6 points. But what does that mean? 6 points. Well, look what we have here. A point moves your interest rate 1/8%, but it costs you 1% of the loan amount. So we were talking about a loan at 100. Nope, Candace, that's not what I want. We're talking about a loan at $150,000. 1% of that loan means I'd multiply. So 1% of that loan would equal $1,500. 1 point equals $1,500. How did I do that? Put into your calculator. 150,000 times 1%, which would be also be times 0.001, right? And that's going to get you $1,500. So at $1,500, 6 points would be 6 times $1,500. So I'm going to take out my handy dandy calculator. That's going to be 150,000 times 6%. That is $9,000. That would be a total of $9,000 you bring to closing. You would bring that to closing. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully, yes. I don't know. Who was it that asked that? Elena, how do you feel about that? Let me know you're good on there. And then the second thing you asked, Elena, was about tax. So tell me what about tax you're asking. And then you also asked about the primary versus the secondary mortgage market. Hmm. Yeah, let's go with primary, secondary mortgage market. So, this is you. This is Elena. You now have curly hair because I never really got past my stick people looking like this. Elena, you go to the bank. And the bank gives you money. And you give them a promissory note. And in that promissory note, you said, hey, I'm going to pay you back my original principal amount I borrowed plus interest. Now let's pretend all of this, you borrowed $150,000. That's your principal. And you end up paying $120,000 in interest. So altogether, you would be paying back the bank $270,000. But that would be in 30 years. The bank doesn't make this $120,000 off of you for 30 years. So what the bank does is they're like, oh no, I don't want that. They sell your promissory note. Who do they sell it to? Fannie Mae or Ginnie Mae or Freddie. Oh, hello. The Federal Home Loan Mortgage Association, Freddie Mac. That's who they sell it to. This is the secondary mortgage market. So basically, they sell them your loan, and then that means instead of giving them, how do I say this? So the loan is worth $270,000 eventually. So maybe they give the bank $200,000. So they pay, that's what they pay money-wise to the bank, which means they're going to make $70,000 off of you when you finish paying off your loan. So it's a good investment for them. This is the secondary mortgage market. This bank is the primary mortgage market. All right? You do have curly hair. You do have curly hair. That's awesome. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm hoping so. Yay. And is this helpful? For people who don't have questions, does it help you to see how I'm explaining things? A, even if you don't have a question. B, for people who do have a question, is it helpful for me to explain it to you? C, should I keep doing these Fri-YAY Par-TAYs? And of course, I'm still getting everything set up. I'll get my music better, and we'll have more of a party situation and all those things. But more importantly, I want to make sure you're learning. So just let me know if this is good, if you want something different, because it's all about what you want. All right? Let's see what my next question is here. Oh, you're very welcome, Elena. You said, what exactly what is needed on solicitation materials? Broker info versus your agent info. Oh, okay, Anna. That depends on your state. I can only tell you North Carolina right now. I'm studying for my Michigan one. But like in my state, old state of North Carolina, you just needed your broker's name, or basically that's it. Other states, you have to have a phone number for your broker, maybe an office address for your broker, maybe your license number for your broker. That is a very state-specific question. So I'm not sure for any state except for North Carolina. But I can, if you're not sure, if you email me, and you know my email address is Candace Ellis at gmail.com, then I can try to help you research what you need, but I can't tell you off the top of my head because every state is different. All right? Oh, you take your test next Friday, so you won't be here? Okay, that's okay. That is okay. Just tell somebody else to be here in your place. And hopefully, no, I need you to come back either on Friday or that Monday so I can sing the song when you pass, Miss Anna. I gotta sing that song for you. You know I do. I cannot wait. Cannot wait for that. All right, guys, it's been about 45 minutes. Does anybody else have a question for me? Any other questions? I would love to answer them. Also, I got to put pictures back up behind me or something. I don't like this plain wall. You will come back, yay. This plain wall is yeah, it's not the thing. It's not it. Can I put a picture of Jason Momoa blowing me a kiss on the back wall? Like, that seems like it would be great. Creepy, maybe, if you're Jason Momoa, but also awesome on my part. Just saying. All right. Somebody asked if I can speak on sellers and buyer sellers credit and debit. Of course I can. Let's talk about it. So, first let's define. Don't like this color anymore. Let's go with black. No, come back here. Cool. So, a debit is when, for real estate, if you are in accounting, it's backwards. But for this real estate exam, a debit means somebody owes money. And a credit means you're going to receive money. All right. So let's think about the sales price. And let's say the sales price was $175,000. Well, who owes the money and who needs to receive the money? Well, this would be a $175,000 seller credit because the seller wants to receive that money. And, well, where does the money come from? It's a buyer debit because that buyer owes the money. A credit is when somebody receives money, and a buyer is when a debit is when somebody owes money. So for everything that's on the test like that, you just have to take just figure it out. So if you had something like discount points, we just figured out, what was it, $9,000 in discount points? That would be a buyer debit because that buyer owes that money. But they don't owe it to the seller. They owe it to the bank. So it's just a buyer debit. It doesn't go to the seller. It is not a seller credit. Right? The seller has a loan to pay off. Well, that means the seller would be debited. Let's say their loan was still for $60,000. The seller owes that $60,000 to who? The bank, not the buyer. So it wouldn't be a buyer credit. It's just a seller debit. Hopefully that makes sense. All right? And then somebody said, what does FSBO and Fred's Corn stand for? Oh, I got you. FSBO stands for sale by owner. Fred's Corn right, is when it stands for familial status, race, disability, both mental and physical, sex, which includes gender and sexual orientation, color, religion, and nationality or national origin. So remember, this is going to be your fair housing protected classes. Fair housing protected classes. Now, my handwriting is so awful there. Let's give it to you in a better way. Let's give it to you where you can take a screenshot. Doot in the car. I'm just looking on the end car here because it's going to be prettier. Land use, real estate agency, fair housing. Here you go. I guess I just could have done this. Right? Those are your protected classes. Yay. All right. Somebody asked, hi, is it Bill Kusu? I don't know how to say that, but your initials are BAM. I like that. I'll call you BAM. So, can I speak on demand and supply? Supply and demand. Oh, yes, I can speak on supply and demand. So, I need to update my iPad, I see. Supply and demand. Let's go back to COVID. And when I say the word COVID, I should say COVID. Okay, that was dramatic for no reason. Anyway, so COVID. Think about masks and toilet paper. If you wanted a face mask or you wanted toilet paper, the price of these things during COVID went sky high because demand was high and supply was low. Right? But now, post-COVID, demand for masks is down and the supply of masks is up. So now the price has dropped in comparison. That is supply and demand. Usually when there is a high demand and a low supply, prices go up. And when there's a low demand and a high supply, prices go down. That's the basic of how it usually works. So, thanks. Let me know, Bam, if that makes sense. Yes, I did give you a nickname. You're welcome. But if you want to spell out your name phonetically so I say it right, I would not be offended. And I'm sorry if I offended you, but hopefully that makes sense to you. Guys, what else can I do? What else can I answer for you? I don't know what that song was. I got nothing. I got nothing on that song. What else can I answer? We went through a couple of questions. I like this. Invite your friends. If this is going to be a party, y'all, we have to, get more people here. Ask more questions. Can I also please talk about how to calculate taxes? All right. Taxes. So you got two different ways to come up with taxes. If you're talking about real property ad valorem taxes, some states it's $1 amount for every $100 of assessed value. And in some states, it's based off of mills. So let's do a little bit of both, shall we? Let's say you have an assessed value of $250,000. If I take that $250,000, I want to know how many 100s are in there. So I'm going to take $250,000 and I'm going to divide it by 100. Now, I'm not even going to lie to you. I still do this. Match up my zeros, which means there are 200 or 2,500 100s and $250,000. So it would take you 25 $100 bills to make $250,000. Make sense? So the problem has to tell you what the assessed value is. And then for every 100, you owe some amount of money. So let's say they told you that the tax rate is $1.75. You would be paying $1.75 for every 100 your property is worth. And we figured out there's 2,500 of those. So we be paying $1.75 2,500 times. And that's going to give us, calculator here, 1.75 times 2,500. It helps if I didn't fat finger it. $1.75 times 2,500. It's giving me 4,375. There we go. That would be your tax amount due. All right. And then we've got mills. Let's say that your assessed value was still $250,000, but it said there's a millage rate of 9. Okay? What we need to know about mills is that a mill is 1/10 of 1 cent. 0.01. So let me just tell you how to do this. Take the $250,000 and instead of dividing by 100, divide by 1,000. And you know how I tell people to remember this? MILL 1000. Or a millennium, 1,000 years. A millimeter, like mil, like it's 1,000. So if I take the $250,000 and I divide by 1,000, I get 250. Now multiply it by your mill rate. Does that make sense? That's going to be it. So, $250,000. $250 times. Your taxes are $22.50. There you go. And up T versus deep sea. Why are they different? Well, because I happen to use deep sea. Where is this? Oh. Right? But up T, why does that say Oh, the right of control. I just say, why does this say crite? But no, it's C stands for the right of control. It just looks weird. All right, so up T. Let's see if we can figure out what up T stands for. I know I've seen it, but I don't use it. So UPTEE. I'm gonna say, I'm like, Well, we know the P is for possession. The E is for enjoyment. I'm assuming this is exclusivity. Let's see. What do we think the U and the T stands for? To transfer. And that would be disposition, enjoyment, exclusive possession, and to sell. What is the up T? Right to use. Oh, ha 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 ha. There you go, up T. So the reason they're different is it just is. I don't tend to say it that way. I like deep C, but it's going to get you to the same place. There you go. Use, possession, transferability, enjoyment, exclusion. Ah, there you go. All right, guys, it is 3:01. I got to go because I got plans with my family. That's why I moved back to Michigan. But more importantly, do we like this? I mean, should I do this next Friday too? Should I do this more than once a week? Like, I want to do what's helpful for you all because every time y'all tell me that you pass, you all can't see me during the webinars, but I am thrilled, and I really do a little dance. I'm doing a big dance. I'm like, hey, like I really help you all doing this. And then if you want, once you do pass, you can still come back and ask me questions about, well, how do I become a real estate agent? How do I get started? We'll maybe save that for the second half, but I want to be a resource for you all because this is where I get my enjoyment. It don't pay very much, but I really do like helping y'all. So, one time a week, good. You love it? Yay. Tell somebody because I don't want to talk to myself. Talk to myself because there ain't no one to talk to. Right? I really do sing and dance over here. So I'm going to go put on a coat before I leave the house because it's freezing here. And I will see you all Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Prep Agent webinar. And next Friday is a Fri-YAY Par-TAY. And Anna, you got this. I expect to hear that you pass next week. Mwah. Smooches, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.